Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Prosperous Nonprofit. And I am very excited to have with you today Sara Allen. Sara, welcome.
Hi, Stephanie. It's so good to be with you.
Well, I'm super excited to chat with you today. We were just talking before we hit records that we actually started working together nearly 5 years ago, and like the time has totally flown. And so I'm just excited to dive in a little bit more and hear about your journey and your work. But I would love for you to tell us about the organization that you work for and what your organization does.
Sure. So I am the executive director for Sojourns Community Health Clinic. We're located in southern Vermont, and we serve multiple parts of New England with integrative healthcare services. So what's really unique about our clinic is that, one, we're a nonprofit. Two, we've got a variety of services within the walls of our clinic. So we have everything from physical therapy, chiropractic, acupuncture, all the way up to naturopathic and primary care, as well as nurses and also community acupuncture. So it really runs the gamut of what people might need in terms of their health care. And the other thing that makes us unique is that we accept insurance so that we can serve a broader swath of patients.
That's so interesting that it is a nonprofit. So what does your funding model look like? You've got fees for your services, I would
Mhm.
imagine. But what other sources of revenue does the organization have?
Sure. So it falls into a few different buckets. We have an on-site apothecary, which is really cool. So a lot of our supplements and natural herbal remedies and tinctures that are locally sourced. We have a wide variety of products that are carefully vetted by our providers so that they ensure quality of ingredients and so that is one revenue stream for our nonprofit. It's an on-site physical store, and then we also ship all over the country. We just launched an online version of that store, which is one of our latest projects to really broaden our reach. So there's that store revenue stream, which over the years has been about a third of our total revenue.
Oh, wow.
And then, yeah, patient fees are, of course, the other largest chunk of our revenue. And then we have a small amount of revenue that comes in from donors as well as education, like courses and things that we offer to the community.
That's really interesting. Because I think like having that diversity of revenue allows you to kind of, if you're seeing that, oh, this doesn't seem so good in terms of, our products, our online stores, our online store, or sorry, our physical or online store. It's like, okay, well, what could we do on the donor side of things to boost that revenue stream? So they're kind of like three pretty distinct and different areas. Do you have anyone on the team that's dedicated to fundraising, that donor side of things, or not really?
Yeah, that a lot of that falls on me as the director, and we're looking at ways to weave in our donor strategy with our marketing strategy. So we're really excited this year because we have hired a marketing team. And so each month of the year, as we're focused, for example, let's say we're focused on a health topic for the month that's around, supplements that help with inflammation. We're thinking of ways to creatively, as we're marketing those supplements, which are sales, right? We're thinking, how can we bring donors into that conversation around this health topic? How can we support? One idea we had was to do a campaign for donors to purchase a new sign for our apothecary store, and really tie
Mm.
in everything that we're doing with donation requests into the health and marketing themes, so that it feels integrated. Because I think one of the challenges that Sojourns faces is wearing both that business hat. We have to think like a business because we're offering healthcare services. We have a store. We sell course content, and we're operating like a nonprofit, right? So we're bringing donors in and trying to tell the compelling story of why support Sojourns. Why buy from us as opposed to Amazon, when you're
Mhm,
looking for
mhm,
your supplements.
mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I'd love to hear more about that, where you said, you're sort of thinking like a nonprofit and a business at the same time. In what ways is that like kind of challenging?
In every way, Stephanie. You know, a lot of our, so like 90, I think 97%, 95, 97% of our patients in our last survey a few years ago are so satisfied with us. They love us. And what we hear from them is that they feel heard and understood. And in an industry in healthcare where it's so fast paced now. If you go to just a standard, you know, Western medical doctor, they're having to put information into a computer, and there's not a lot of eye contact and human aspects. We still have to do all that, but our doctors, what we hear over and over again from patients is that Sojourns really listens to me. Like the doctor read my chart before my visit. All of our doctors collaborate daily on patient cases. Someone may have Lyme disease and they're seeing our specialist for that, and then they're getting physical therapy for the chronic pain that they have related to that. So I share that with you because to answer your question, that the donations, it's when a patient is then paying for a service, we really have to make the case with those patient testimonials of why a patient would want to give on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of our patients are donors and vice versa. But then there's also where we want to grow is finding donors, even nationally, who want to support an integrated model of care because it's so powerful and effective. If we could find donors outside of our current pool of patients who are willing to support this model, one of our goals is to really expand visibility for what Sojourns is doing as a model of care and teach other clinics to do this because it has such great effectiveness in the health and well-being of the patients.
I love that. So I would imagine, like, yes, it's challenging, but it also serves you really well to think about this nonprofit and business model. And I love that vision of, you know, expanding and teaching and sharing your model so that it can be replicated elsewhere. So you know, thinking about other organizations, other nonprofits that maybe are not, you know, a health clinic like Sojourns, but what would you say, or what advice might you give to help other leaders think about their organization as both a nonprofit and a business?
Yes, that's a great question. And, you know, my background is in the nonprofit sector and helping organizations plan strategically and think in that way. So a lot of, you know, my experience of the nonprofit sector, I am from the Washington, D.C. area, and it's just a plethora of nonprofits down there, right? And so many of them are doing amazing work. And yet there's a mindset of, you know, what I would encourage nonprofits is to bring in a bit of a business mindset, because otherwise this sort of you know, woe is me kind of little nonprofit, you know, that doesn't really serve them well. And so I worked for an amazing nonprofit over 10 years ago where we had this fee for service model, much like we do here at Sojourns, where we would do consulting in the community and generate income to feed the nonprofit side of the organization. And I think if more, I've spoken to some nonprofits up here in Vermont that do that as well. And it takes creativity, it takes strategy, you have to be smart about it. But the more a nonprofit can bring in other revenue streams besides donations, I think it's like your personal finances, right? You want to diversify those funding streams so that you're more stable, so that when a pandemic hits, you have backup plans. And so I would encourage nonprofits to think about ways that outside of your programs, you know, that where you're serving your community, where can you form strategic partnerships even around revenue? So for example, we just hosted a tasting event for some of our supplements at a local gym and sold product that we wouldn't have otherwise sold to that audience. And so that brings in revenue to the clinic. It serves that gym and their people. It educates people about a product that we believe in that can help their health, which is creatine, by the way. Everyone should be taking creatine. And it's just fun. You know, I think building relationships and getting out of your little bubble is really powerful for nonprofits.
I think that, yeah, I think that's so important. That's a lesson that I have learned as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, is to put myself out there and meet people. And that's what's going to help sort of elevate my business and my work to the next
Mm.
level is forming these strategic partnerships. And then on the flip side, I've also worked inside nonprofit organizations that were very insular and like did not really talk to anybody else, and didn't really make those connections or form those partnerships. It was more just like, okay, we're just here doing our little thing. And, I don't know. I don't think that's the way to expansion. So I love that. I also love when you mentioned that you've got your apothecary and then you took that shop online as well. And so I think that, that's another, I think that was creative. And it's like, okay, well, this is doing well in person. So let's see how it would do online. Let's think about expansion there. So what kind of like decision making went into that? Because it's no small feat to get a whole bunch of products that you have like in a physical shop onto, a website and be able to take payments and ship and all of that stuff. Like that's a lot of work.
Yes, yes. What prompted it? So I came on here about 2 years ago, and it was right after COVID. And so sales for the apothecary store had really dropped. And we suspect that people were ordering from Amazon because it was so easy. Whereas with our store, they would have to call and then come pick it up, or we could ship to them. But looking at our internal processes, that's the other piece of thinking like a business as a nonprofit, is to really look at your processes and systems. Are they efficient? It was becoming inefficient to do things in that way, to take orders by phone when we could let someone set up a subscription online to fulfill their order without, of course, losing that personal touch, right? So we're always
Mhm.
balancing. But yeah, that's what prompted is looking at the sales, which had gone down after COVID, and then looking at our internal processes around even if sales were still high, how could we increase efficiency? So we hired a wonderful store manager last year, a couple days a week, and his primary project was to get this store online. And so we brought in him and then two other people to help load up all the product images and descriptions. And it was a massive, several months
Mhm.
project. Prior to that, we had used a store platform that was kind of run by a third party, but we did it in stages, I guess is what I'm saying. We used that initial platform, and then we thought, well, we really need a little more versatility, and so we switched to a Shopify store and brought in
Mhm.
Jeremiah and got that launched. And so now what's beautiful about it is that our marketing is easier. So from that online store, we can now very easily market to customers, um, featured products based on their trends of buying, right? We can
Mhm.
serve them better. Ultimately, the goal is, apart from revenue, is to serve people more effectively and get them what they need.
Yeah, I love that. Um, That's fantastic. And I think the mindset of like, okay, well, this process, this thing that we have now isn't really serving our people the best that it could be. So, what
Yes.
can we do to make this experience better? And I think that's something we don't do often enough is assessing like, okay, yeah, we've been doing this particular process or this program or whatever for a long time, but is it actually having the intended purpose? Is it the best that it possibly could be? And so you saw that maybe it wasn't. So let's make a change. And you've also then had an increase in revenue that goes along with that. So I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and we just to add to that, Stephanie, we also are
yeah.
innovating within, so the store is just one revenue stream, but within patient care, we've really maxed out. One of the beautiful things about Sojourns is that um, our providers get to spend more time with patients. And that comes at a cost, right? Because we're not just churning out patient visits day in and day out. And so one of
Mhm.
the models we're looking at this year at launching for healthcare services is a group medical visit model, which has shown, it has evidence that it's proven to be really effective at things like prediabetes or high blood pressure, lowering cholesterol, some of those more lifestyle oriented health conditions. When you're in a group model, and sharing your experience with others and really learning from each other as well as the provider, it can be really effective and powerful. So, and we can bill insurance for that. So that's a win-win, because for a provider's 1 hour of time, for example, they can serve 6 to 8 people. So we can serve more people. They're getting a greater benefit, and we're able to generate more revenue in that hour. So that's another innovation we're looking at to maximize revenue within the patient fee stream as well.
That is so interesting. I never would have thought about that. But I mean, you're thinking about how to scale, because in your model, it's very much like revenue is connected to time, the time of somebody, the time of your providers. And if you don't, there's only so much that you can do on, say, your pricing, or maybe getting more providers, but maybe then you don't have the space to add more providers. And so, okay, well, what are our options to scale then if we can't really do much on price, we can't really add more providers? Changing that ratio for some of those services, like you were saying, I think that's so interesting. And again, I think something that other organizations can think about, like, okay, well, how can we scale? What pieces of the puzzle can we shift? What levers can we pull? And that's really interesting. That's so cool. Yeah, this is really interesting, because it really is so much of a like business model
Yeah.
inside a nonprofit like tech structure.
Well, it really is. And I think our core motivation, we always want to come back to serving people on their wellness journey. And it's so important for us, when people feel heard and understood, they then are more empowered to make health choices and know how to ask questions around healthcare and seek out alternative solutions that will serve them uniquely. And so that community focus, the group medical visit fits with our focus on really serving the community. So we operate like a nonprofit, we think like a business, but then we want to serve like a community member. So for example, Friday mornings, we offer community acupuncture. And again, that group space has a really powerfully healing effect when you're in a room with other people receiving treatment for healing. And so as we serve as we're generating all this revenue, it's so that we can do more of that kind of work, which is not as profitable, but is really important to us, and what our founder really cared about when she founded the clinic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's really important to look at in your financial model. And I know this is something that we look at in my company. But like, you're going to have, as nonprofits, there are probably going to be some programs that are not as like profitable as others, meaning they're maybe less funded. You don't have as much funding for them, or they happen to be more expensive or more staff heavy or whatever it might be. But really understanding your financials to know, okay, yes, this particular program isn't quite as profitable, but we're going to keep doing it anyway, because number one, it's important to our mission. And number two, we know that this program over here is more profitable and can sustain it, or we have unrestricted funds or whatever it might be. So I think that's, just yet another reason that it's so important to really understand your numbers and manage them well, so that you can make decisions like that. Because if you have too many programs that are like, or too many services or activities in your case that are not profitable, well, then you're going to get yourself in a situation.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, just to send a shout out to 100 Degrees and your team. They have been phenomenal. I worked with you in my prior role and here, and getting our books set up in a way where we could track programs and profit and loss within a program area has been tremendous. So I highly recommend to the nonprofits out there as well to hire Stephanie. She's amazing.
Thank you for the shout out. That was not prompted.
Yeah, she did not
but I
prompt me.
appreciate it. I appreciate it. I was not trying to set you up for that, but I
No, I
appreciate
know
it.
you weren't.
I want to shift gears a little bit, and talk a little bit more about your journey, because I know that, you've worked in lots of different nonprofits over the years, and have lots of nonprofit experience. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what your journey as a nonprofit leader has looked like. So kind of walk us through.
Sure. So, oh gosh, way back when, 15 years ago, I actually was a consultant, and many of my clients were nonprofits. And what I loved about wearing that hat is I could kind of come in, and many of the nonprofits, you listening to this may know, when you hire an external consultant, there's a lot of value in that because they can bring in this objective perspective on, what's going on. So as a consultant, I did strategic planning. I helped them with development and marketing planning. And really, it was a lot of smaller nonprofits. And that's where I was able to bring in all that business process oriented perspective to help them run more efficiently as they're so focused on their programs and the heart of their programs. I think a lot of nonprofits don't have the bandwidth to think like that. And so that's the value of, bringing in external resources. And there's grants for things like that. There's not always a budget for that, but there are ways to fund that. And I think it's really important. And then from there, I worked for a smaller medical brigade based out of Northern Virginia as their executive director. And they did work internationally. So that was interesting as well, to balance kind of getting local volunteers and donors to support international projects. So we would travel to Honduras with a medical team, all volunteer. We would do clean water projects in the rural communities there, which was an amazing feat to do that from abroad. And yeah, it required, as the director, what I love about that role in the nonprofit that I was in and am in now is that I get to touch on every piece of the organization. So, working with the board, the marketing, the development and fundraising, the operations, the finances. As a director, you really need to have the pulse on all of those things, and you need a good team under you, right? That's where there's good communication flow between leadership and your program leads. It's really important. So I enjoy that as a generalist. I love, kind of seeing all the pieces and how they come together. One thing that's been challenging, I find, and I'm sure other nonprofit directors feel this, is that it really you need an external part of your role really needs to be externally focused, right? And it's so easy in a small nonprofit to get sucked into the details, into the operations, and be that inward facing, and forget that there's all these partnerships to be formed and donors to be found. And so I think our goal this year is that I can be more externally facing and get the team internally and the infrastructure to support that.
That is a really interesting thing that I think, for people that are very good at, like, not necessarily multitasking, but enjoy that sort of diversity of responsibilities. I think it works really well. And it can also be tricky to, like, shift gears and, like, shift your brain to be like, okay, we're not thinking about finances now. Now I need to go be an extrovert and talk to these potential partners and, like, try and build these relationships. It's very different. How do you sort of shift gears or manage your time, or, like, put on the different hats? Because there is a lot. And like you said, you kind of do need to have a pulse on everything, but you can't do everything at the same time, at the same level, So, like, how do you manage that balance?
Sure. I'm a time Nazi. No, it is a balance. I on the side, I'm also a life and health coach, and as I got my certification last year. And what's been interesting in coaching clients is we talk a lot about time and how to have priority focused time every day, 60 to 90 minutes. My business coach taught me this, where it's that priority for the day that's going to move the ball forward on your goals. And so as you look at your calendar, and that's hard, that can be hard when you're in the role of a director or any role where you've got a lot of moving pieces. But look at your calendar and set your goal and priority, then look at your calendar and see if it's reflecting, if your time is reflecting movement toward your goals or those priorities is so important. I love time blocking. It doesn't always work, when the day hits and things come up, but time blocking for me. So for example, I try to bookend my week with all the financial and admin stuff. Mondays and Friday afternoons, So, and then I've got days where it's really conducive to meetings. Like Thursdays, I love we pack in a lot of meetings on Thursdays because by that time in the week, people are ready to connect and be social. And so each person has to find their workflow, but I think that helps me to have, like, okay, this chunk of time I'm going to focus on communications or fundraising, or this day I'm going to be out in the community.
hmm Yeah. And I think the key thread that I'm hearing is like intentionality. Like
Yes.
it's not just like, let's see what the day hands us and let's
Yeah.
see what we can get done. It's like very intentional. And of course, like you said, it doesn't always work out perfectly the way that we intended. But I think the key is to be intentional about
Yes.
it. And I love that question of like, does your calendar reflect your priorities? Because I at the beginning of February, I looked back at January and I was like, whoa, I had way too many meetings. And so I looked through my calendar and I categorized them into like different buckets. And I was like, oh, I spent way too much time doing this one particular thing that, like, frankly, should not be that high on my list, but I spent like 50% of my time like doing this. And I'm like, okay, what can I shift in February so that my calendar better reflects my priorities? And, doing it in retrospect is not helpful, but that's why I looked ahead to the following month and like, okay, what meetings can I pull myself out of? What do I not need to be a part of? I think we often think that perhaps we're more needed than we really are.
Yeah.
We need to
Yes.
practice like not doing things and
Yeah.
declining meetings and saying, no,
Yes.
team, y'all can handle this and just tell me the end result or ask me what decision, if there's a decision you need me to make, just ask me. I don't need to go to this meeting. So yeah, I think that's huge. And that has been very helpful for me, especially when I'm like, 2 weeks into a month and I'm like, why have I spent the last
What
like
happened?
40 hours in meetings? What just happened? Yes.
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
good.
So good.
Yeah.
So good.
Mm.
What would, as an executive director, we have a lot of listeners who are in a similar role where they're the leader of an organization, but many who are not there yet. And maybe that is a goal for them to lead
Mm.
an organization one day. What advice might you have to somebody who's working in a nonprofit and, it doesn't necessarily matter which department or what their role is, but, has the goal of leading an organization? What type of maybe stretch assignments should they try to take on or additional responsibilities, or what should they be thinking about or doing now to prepare them for that?
Mm. Oh, wow. That's a great question. I would say tap into your purpose. Tap into what it is that's speaking to your heart right now and what you're doing, and what it is you maybe don't like so much about it. And I was just listening to a message this morning about um, kind of your calling and your purpose and alignment with that.
Mm,
And I do believe that when you step into that, you can't fail. And so
mm,
I would encourage people, and even as I mentor younger staff here, I'm always looking for their strengths and what they're good at and what they love doing. And so that would
mhm,
be my biggest piece of advice, is to get aligned with that and really think about um, beyond your purpose, what are your how do you like to operate, right? Like getting
mhm,
back to that time and priorities and workflow, like avoiding burnout, I think is really important for anyone in any role. And so when we're aligned with our purpose, it can be so easy to give 400% and then crash and burn. And so another thing I've been working on is, how can I go into this? My word for the year is ease. I think I mentioned
mhm.
to you a few weeks ago. And
Yeah.
how can you be in your purpose, give your all, and function with ease without burnout?
Mhm,
And
mhm,
then the third piece, I think, is giving back, because when you're in alignment with purpose, you're not burning yourself out. You're going to live from a place of abundance. So whatever role you're in, as you're moving into, let's say you become a director at a nonprofit that's aligned with your purpose, you're then able to think more generously and externally about the work that's being done. And that's so
mhm,
important. So um, yeah, I think, I'm imagining someone in a role where they're just, they know they have this potential in them, and they're waiting to just wake that up and move into, a higher level of service. I think those are the people that are, yeah, they're passion and purpose oriented. They manage their time well. And the other thing I'll add is to think like the leader you want to be.
mhm,
Take your mind beyond where you are, and create a vision for what you want your day, your life to look like. And that vision, I mean, it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. That create your perfect day. There's an exercise you can do called My Perfect Day, and I'm sure you've done it.
yes.
And just write it out, what you want your day as the director of your ideal nonprofit or business to look like, and it will begin to feed you day in and day out.
I do that on a pretty regular basis. Like every few weeks is just like part of my daily journaling. I always like write out, what my perfect day is. And then it is, yeah, I always have that in my head. And then um when it's at the top of my head, sometimes I realize I'm like, oh, I had like pretty close to my perfect day the other day. And it's just such a nice reminder. I love that exercise so much. I love that all your life coaching stuff is coming through right now.
Well, and I love it because, so often my blind spot is I get caught in the doing. Like, what am I going to do during the day, right? And there's a great visualization I do with clients around who do you want to be? Like when your feet hit the
Mhm.
floor in the morning, who are you going to be today? And if you can focus on who I want to be, what my day is going to look like, then the doing just flows because you're in the
Mhm.
mindset of the leader that you want to be. And it's less
Mhm.
about the tasks. Yeah,
Yes. Oh, I love all this so much. This is like right up my alley.
I know.
I love it. Amazing. Okay, well, I feel like we could continue chatting, but I'm going to start to wrap us up. And so I would love to hear, I ask everybody this question. What does a prosperous nonprofit look like to you?
A prosperous nonprofit doesn't have to worry about tomorrow. It is,
Ooh.
I hold in my heart for this clinic um, that we can do what we do with great joy and ease because we know the money will come in every day that we need to do what we do to serve with heart, serve our community, help people be well.
Mm, that's so good. That's so good. And there's so many organizations that are worrying very much about tomorrow.
Yeah.
There really are. And so I
Yeah.
love that. Doesn't have to worry
Yeah.
about tomorrow. Amazing. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for chatting with me today. If our listeners want to learn more about you, more about Sojourns, where can they go to find more info?
I'm so glad you asked. They can visit sojourns.org, Sojourns. And then our store is sojournsapothecary.org, where they can shop and support our clinic in that way.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so excited. I'm going to go check out the online store.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yay.
And it's funny. My friend, when you were like, everybody should be taking creatine, my friend just mentioned to me the other day that she started using creatine. And I'm like, isn't that for like bodybuilders? No, it's more than that.
It's more than that. Not just your muscles. It's great for your memory, your brain, all sorts of things. I just put a scoop of
Okay.
it in my tea or my smoothie. You don't even taste it. It dissolves beautifully.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna explore that because this is the
Mhm.
second time I've heard it in the last 3 days. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, Sarah, thanks again so much. I really appreciate your time and sharing all of your beautiful wisdom and expertise with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. My pleasure.